All right, well then let's move on and start. We begin by reciting our opening prayers. So we have a book for the benefit of Beth, who is with us for the first time. I will send you this book, and it's a prayer book there to help us to remember what it is that we are doing. Why are we doing these teachings? Why are we participating? Why are we doing practices? Why are we studying, and so on? So these prayers are to ourselves to help us to recall what our motivation is. And generally, the motivation is so that we can help other beings to attain enlightenment. That whatever we are doing, whatever we are able to attain ourselves, is for the benefit of others. And this way we are overcoming our ego selfishness, that everything is more or less just passing right through us. So for tonight, I will read these prayers. I will recite these prayers. Everybody can pay attention. Most everybody has books and so on. So this first one is called the altruistic motivation. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. In Tibetan, Dagla dang war je pe dra no pa je pe ge. Darpa dang tam she ken pe bar du jo pa je pa tam she ki so je pe. Manam ka dam yam pe sem chen tam she de wa dang den. Dug now dang drel nur du la na me pa yang dag pa zog pe zhang zhu brin po she to pa ja. Next prayer is the action Bodhichitta prayer. Bodhichitta is two words in Sanskrit. Bodhi means enlightenment, and chitta means the heart mind. So this is the enlightened heart mind. So this is the action of the enlightened heart mind. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In Tibet, Deshe du san ma ge gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wala ko. Ma she bar du lu na gi sam ge wala ko. Du de ring ne song te ni ma sang ta sam gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. And we'll go to page 5, the short refuge prayer. We take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. These are called the three jewels. The three jewels are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Sangha is the body of the Buddha. The Dharma is the speech of the Buddha. And the mind is the mind of the Buddha. The Buddha, when we refer to that, we're referring to the body of the mind of the Buddha. So we say, and when we do this, we're holding the three jewels at our heart. So our hands are cupped together at our heart to remind us of these three jewels. So we say, in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In Tibet, Sangye Chodang Soki Chonamla Shangju Bardu Dagni Kapsuchi Dagi Jinsoki Pe Sonamgi Drola Panchir Sangye Jupasho. And then our last prayer for today is the Four Immeasurables. These are the four vast immeasurables of Bodhichitta, the holy enlightened mind. And simply they are loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity, sense of balance, a sense of sameness of all things. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pesam chantam she dewa dang dewe gurdang dampar jorchi. Dugnal dang dunal gi gudang drawar jorchi. Dugnal me pe dewa dang midra war jorchi. Ne ring chak dang ni dang dra wei tang namla ne par jorchi. Okay, thank you. So we'll talk more about these prayers as we go along. We need to remind ourselves all the time. So we're beginning this new cycle of Buddhism 101. We've repeated this cycle many times. The book that is our main reference book is this book here called The Jewel Ornament of Liberation. And this book is regarded as a stages of the path. This is the path to recognize oneself as a potential Buddha and to guide us on through the path to become the Buddha. So this book is very much like a college textbook and goes into a fair amount of detail. We will be able to talk about the major points of each chapter as we proceed. We're not going to get through the entire book in Buddhism 101. We go up to about chapters 6 or 7 or 8, something like that, in these next 8 weeks. And we, as I say, we discuss the major points about these and build upon that. It's recommended that if you are a student of Buddhism, that you get a copy of this and you have this as part of your library. This book was actually written about 1,000 years ago, and it was suggested to be written because the our lineage, the Kagyu lineage that we are part of, is an oral lineage, that the teachings were passed down from teacher to disciple, from who became a teacher down to a disciple, and so on like that, orally. And there were many different teachers in many different places and so on. And there were starting to get, some differences of way of expressing things. So one of our great yogis suggested to his student Gampopa that he compose a book that would bring all this together, all these oral teachings and so on together into one book. So it could be more unified and so on. So the success of that has been really, really great. And other lineages have their Lam Rim text, their Stages of the Path book modeled on this one. This was the first of those kinds of books. So this book written by Gampopa, he was a physician at the time, and who became a monastic and became a yogi, and was very intelligent, was able to write and read, of course, and so he was able to put this all together for our benefit that has lasted all these many, many generations. So if anybody has any questions or comments while I'm talking, I don't mind being interrupted. Just turn on your microphone and come on in, and that'll be fine. So does anybody have anything at this point that you want to talk about?
Who's the author again, Lance?
Gampopa, Gampopa, often called the Dharma Lord Gampopa.
Thank you.
Yes. So, and this book, I will also say that this book has been translated into many, many, many different languages. And this is the second translation into English. But this particular book in English is very, very accessible. It was translated by Kenshin Kunchok Yeltsin Rinpoche, who is one of our great teachers in our lineage, in our Drikung Kagyu lineage. And so he has given many teachings on this. And several years ago, back in 2011, 2012, we beseeched, we supplicated him and asked for a teaching on the dual ornamental liberation. And he gave page by page, line by line, word by word teaching on the book. And 75 hours has been recorded, both video and audio, if you're interested, that you want to sit through the whole thing. And it is a great work to be able to do that. I was fortunate enough to be there for every single session. And I asked permission to be able to give these teachings, and was granted permission by all the different lamas that I asked, all the different great teachers, Kenshin in particular, Garchen Rinpoche in particular, Khenpo Samdup, Drupan Tinli Ningpo, Khenpo Soltram. So many teachers have I asked that I can do this so that we can benefit as many people as possible, to go over Buddhism 101 like we do like this. The lamas teach at a maybe a slightly different, higher level, but they're pulling on all the information that we talk about. So these foundational conversations that we have coming from these books and so on are very important for most of us to be able to try and assimilate into the Buddhist culture, understand what it is, the reference points that they are making and using in the Lama's talks and so on. So it's they are great foundation teachings. So speaking about the teachings, the teachings came to us originally by the Buddha. The Buddha lived 2,600 years ago. Shakyamuni Buddha was his name. That was the name he was given. His given name by his family was Siddhartha Gautama. So I'm not going to tell the story for Siddhartha Gautama at this point. We will do it later on in our Buddhism 101, but not now. But he was a prince who was, would have been a king, and he chose, Siddhartha Gautama chose the path of enlightenment. And he became enlightened. And as he did, he began to teach the way in which he attained enlightenment. And those teachings are called the Dharma. That's the speech of the Buddha. It's called the Dharma. And the Dharma is like a pathway, or sometimes called a thread in Sanskrit language. The Dharma would be a thread. So there's many different threads for many different pathways and so on. And this is the pathway to enlightenment. So it's through this, the sutras is the way that the Buddha taught. The sutras are the literal word that the Buddha spoke. So much like in Christianity, they talk about the Gospels as being the literal words of Jesus. Well, the sutras are the literal words of the Buddha and the great masters who came after him, who they themselves became Buddhas because they were able to follow the instructions and find themselves to be able to have attained enlightenment. So sutras are also referred to as these great masters as well. But the preponderance of all the sutras are by Shakyamuni Buddha. So there were three baskets that they talk about that these teachings were done in. There were three baskets, one of one kind of teaching, another kind of teaching, and another kind of teaching. So it's just a metaphor for saying these groups of teachings. So the first group and the most fundamental, of course, are the Vinaya teachings. And these Vinaya teachings are ethical self-discipline. Ethical self-discipline are what they might refer to as the Hinayana, the fundamental path. So you can imagine that 2,600 years ago, when the Buddha first began to teach, who was the people that he was teaching were all these different kinds of people from different kinds of backgrounds, and many of them were miscreants. Many of them had many defilements, many confusions, many emotions, doing difficult things and so on, causing themselves and others great harm and so on. So the first thing that he was teaching was discipline. We need to discipline ourselves. And he was accentuating the need for the monastery, for the monastic way of life, to be able to make everybody have a certain commonality between them. So everybody should take their clothes off. They should wear the same kind of robes, very simple robes. Everybody should wear the same colors. Everybody should cut their hair, and that so much of our ego is wrapped up in our appearance, wrapped up in our hair and our hairstyle and so on. So, he said that, the monks, the monastery, all the monastics should cut their hair, wear these robes and so on. They should sit in a certain position. They should all live together, and they should get up early in the morning and have a routine that they do and practices and teachings that they adhere to, during each day and so on like that. So he was showing them a way to discipline themselves. He did this for the monks, the male monastics, but he also did this for the nuns. And there was nunneries, and he instituted nunneries, and many of the great teachers have been female teachers and students and so on. So there was a how do you say in the culture of India back 2,600 years ago, of course, there was a difference between the men and the women, and, there were political differences and so on like that, just like it is now, but maybe worse back then. But nevertheless, in the monastery, they were trying to keep it to be the same. It was separate but equal. So one of the things about the monks and the nuns were they were all supposed to be celibate. They would take vows of celibacy. So all this were all means to be able to discipline themselves, to make themselves proper vessels, proper bodies, to be able to take in the teachings and to be able to process the teachings without contaminating them. Taking the teachings as being pure and not contaminating them with defilements, with emotions, with confusions, and so on. So this was the intention, and this was the first basket. This is called the Vinaya Teachings, the Vinaya basket, or the basket of the Hinayana, the fundamental vehicle. The second was were the sutra teachings, and these were the teachings of the Dharma. These were the teachings of the Buddha. They were all teachings of the Buddha, but these were doctrinal teachings. These were about how to develop absorbed concentration, how to develop one-pointed mindfulness, how to develop meditation, how to recognize our humanness, our human nature, be able to recognize that and to be able to categorize all of that so that we can analyze it and evaluate it and so on, so that we can rise above, that we can transcend our human nature into what we talk about as our true nature. This true nature, this sameness that we all have, that we all share, that is deep within us, this essence that we have within us. So this is described in many different ways. And in Buddhism, it's described as our Buddha nature, that this is our awakened quality. Buddha is a Sanskrit word that means the awakened one, the awakened one. So that we all have this potential to be awakened, and that we have this essence of this commonality between us all. So we'll talk an awful lot about that as we go on. So the sutra teachings, or the Dharma teachings, were the absorbed concentration, and these led to the Mahayana. The Mahayana is the middle way teachings. And the middle way teachings is that we unselfishly are engaging in these teachings and these practices for the benefit of others. And then the next basket was the Abhidharma. The Abhidharma are the discriminating awareness teachings, where the wisdom of emptiness, the wisdom of all this contrived, fabricated stuff of our mind, we begin to evaluate through our discriminating awareness. So this is the Vajrayana. This is the indestructible path. This is the wisdom path of the Buddha, to become Buddha. So we'll talk more about this, of course. And so this discriminating awareness needs to be able to be applied. And we do this through understanding our true nature, and that it is like a indestructible diamond. That we have this diamond within ourselves, this indestructible jewel. And like all diamonds, there's many facets to this jewel. And the jewel is made up of the holy enlightened mind. That's what it's composed of, the Bodhichitta that we said our prayers for earlier. The Bodhichitta, the holy enlightened mind, loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So all these beings have those qualities, those four immeasurable qualities. But the way in which those four qualities are actualized are the activities of the different enlightened ones, the different Buddhas or the different Bodhisattvas, the different holy ones, the way in which they are enacting, the way that they are working in the community, the way that they are teaching, and the way are they behaving themselves, and so on. So to be able to understand that, we need to have this discriminating awareness, to be able to understand what it is, who we are as human beings, and what it is that is holding us back from our true Buddha nature. So we need to develop this discriminating awareness to be able to do that. So this wisdom of this emptiness of our that this ego and so on is all contrived. All this is contrived in the mind. So right now, it's a very abstract thing. We will talk a lot more about that. So this is to give a background of what the Jewel Ornament liberation is about and what the teachings of the Buddha are about. So the first chapter in this book begins with what we call the primary cause. What is, as human beings, as enlightened beings, what is our primary nature? What is the cause? What is our primary cause? Why are we here? What is our purpose? What is our motivation? So our primary cause in Buddhism is to realize this true nature, this Buddha nature. And as we do that, we begin to purify ourselves from all our emotions, all our confusions, all our confused thoughts, our misconceptions, our habitual tendencies, the things that we have built up over years and years and years, and that we begin to take things for granted, that we know things when really we're just have fabricated some kind of a story, and we're just trying to maintain that story, although it may not be true at all. And we're just following that story because it just seems convenient for us and so on. So our egos get all wrapped up in these fabrications of our rationalizations of who we think we are and what it is that we have around us and who our families are and our friends are and so on like that. So we can see that this is the way communities are built. We can see this is the way that nations are built. And then we can see that there's great conflict that goes on between all of this. So we need to look at this fundamental basic level to be able to understand how this all builds up to get to, the dynamics of politics and of family politics and nation politics and so on like that. So this primary cause is to understand our true nature, our Buddha nature. And this Buddha nature is, it seems in the beginning, very abstract. And we can't always put our finger right on it. We can't always say exactly what it is because there's so many various things that are implied when we talk about these things. So the wise teachers talk about things in similes, that we can't say exactly what it is, but we can talk about it like it's like this, or it's as that, or it seems like this, something like that, similes. So the similes, to understand and appreciate the similes, we need to understand that sometimes a simile is like picking up a rock. And it just seems like this hard, dense rock, and it's got a lot of dirt on it and so on. But a person who is familiar with the geography of the area there might look at that rock and say, oh, you know what? That is ore, O-R-E, that is silver ore. That inside that rock, inside that dirt is pure silver. And we need to be able to break that rock down. We need to be able to melt it down and slough off all the defilement, all the dirt, all the contaminants, all the stuff that the slag that has no value to us, to be able to get to the ore of the silver that is in there, which has great value for many different reasons. So the teachings are like that. The teachings are like ore. We may not recognize them in the beginning. they may just look like a rock to us. But as we begin to purify those rocks, then that ore, that silver, becomes available to us, and we recognize the true value of what it is that we are learning, what it is that we are practicing. Another simile for these teachings, for the Dharma, is a mustard seed. A mustard seed is very, very tiny, very small. And to really unlock the mustard seed, it needs to be crushed. And when it's crushed, then there is a fluid, there is a liquid, there is an oil that is in that mustard seed. There is also the fiber of that seed. And that mustard seed fiber can be used for flavoring food and so on like that. And the oil can be used for many different things, can be used for food, and can be used even to light lamps and so on, can be used for many different things. However, it's so tiny. How could anybody imagine that from that tiny little drop of oil and fiber that comes out of that, that it's going to be something that is substantial or meaningful for us? But what we find is if we take a lot of mustard seeds together and we crush all those mustard seeds, now we're getting something where we have much more oil. We have much more of the fiber for our seasonings and so on. So we're recognizing that from the tiny little bit, but if we have a lot of tiny seeds, we can make something that is meaningful for ourselves. So there's a simile there. Another simile is milk. In milk, it comes naturally from mammals and is very, very nutritious. And we can grow on milk when we're first born. It's really only milk that we can digest, that we can eat and digest and so on. So we know that it has a great value to it. However, it's not apparent that there is butter in the milk. We know that we can take milk that has just been brought out from a cow or whatever, and it's been sat into some kind of a jug or a vessel or something, and we can see that over time, cream will rise up to the top. And the cream is very delicious and very nutritious and has great value for us at the same time and everything. But it's not known that there is a butter within the milk and the cream. It takes an activity of churning the milk, of pouring it into a long cylinder kind of a vessel with a plunger, and through the constant action of churning the milk up and down, that the particles of the fat all come together and make this butter, which is very nutritious and very delicious and very good to cook with and so on like that. So the Dharma is sometimes like that we have to apply this process, which seems, it's not readily known to us that is possible, but somehow it was discovered. And now we recognize that by applying the Dharma, applying the wisdom of the Dharma, like the churning of the milk, that there is great benefit there. So these three similes are pointing out to us that there are many things that we don't know that might be all around us, and that we need to be able to allow ourselves to be open, to be able to bring these things in to our awareness and be able to go through the process of recognizing the value of these different elements and so on like that, and being able to put together a system by which we can do this. So Buddhism is a system. The wisdom of the Buddha was his gift, was that he was able to articulate this system of being able to analyze who we are as human beings, what our nature is all around us, what we call nature, all the trees and all that, is all part of who we are. And to be able to have a system by which we can analyze that. And when we get lost in our analysis, we can get back to it. Because, sometimes these things are very abstract, and it's very easy to go off on some kind of a mental tangent, and we get lost in where was I? So we need to be able to bring it back home, so to speak, to be able to continue our analysis. And also to be able to teach it to others, to be able to have conversation with it, with other people and so on. We need to have a system by which we can do that. So the Buddha was very wise in being able to design these Dharma teachings, this thread, this pathway, in order for us to be able to do this. So using these similes and so on, you'll see how these things all work together. It's all part of the system. We find that there are many different kinds of human beings, and that all human beings have this core of essence of this true nature, but it's on the outside that we're all different, the way in which we think and do things and so on. So we need to be able to categorize what all this means. So in the very broadest sense, we begin to look at what we call the 5 families of the Buddha. The 5 families of the Buddha. So the 5 families are, number 1, the disconnected family. Number 2 is the indefinite family. And number 3 is the hearer family. Hearer, like hearing, you hear. The next one, the 4th one, is the solitary realizer family. And the 5th one is called the Mahayana family, or the middle way family, or the family who is on the path, the great vehicle, Mahayana, the great vehicle. So these are the 5 families of the Buddha. So you hear me repeat myself. I repeat, and I know it's a process to be able to hear this. And whether you're taking notes or not, I hope that you would be taking notes. And if you have this book, you can follow this book, which is an outline of this book. So it's very helpful in being able to organize ourselves and so on. So I repeat because it takes many times for us to be able to bring these ideas together and to be able to create this thread, to be able to see this thread of what they're bringing together. So I hope I don't repeat myself too much, but it is necessary, I think, to some degree to repeat ourselves so that we can understand this. So this first of the family of the Buddha is the disconnected family. And this family has 6 traits, 6 different aspects to this family. So the first one is that although these beings are suffering, they're not moved by it. They begin to take the suffering as, well, this is the way life is. It's part of life. I just accept it for what it is. And I don't try and I don't see that there's anything on the other side. There's nothing that I can do to make this any better. There's nothing for me to be able to formulate that. I don't have enough intelligence to be able to understand why I'm suffering and that I am suffering and that there's something I can do to relieve the suffering. So this is the first of the disconnected family. The second is they have no faith in that which is within themselves. They may have this yearning. They may have this feeling that maybe there's something there that I can figure out here. But again, they don't have the resolve. They don't have the power to be able to bring it together, to be able to overcome this suffering. So although they feel something, they don't have the wisdom to be able to actualize that. They have no modesty. These beings have no modesty in that they may be doing rude things to themselves and to others and so on, and they have no shame about it. They have no feeling that, oh, this is what we do, and I'm not civilized. There's not a civility that we try and create for ourselves. There's no morality that we have for ourselves. There's no modesty that we develop, and a sense of caring for others or caring for ourselves. There's no thought for what others may think. They may hear people speak, and they may hear those who are trying to be leaders among them, but they think, well, what makes this person a leader? What makes them better than me? And so I just discount whatever they say. I'm the only one that matters. What I think is important. And right now, I don't think anything, and that's okay. And that's how they are. They're disconnected from any kind of community, from any kind of organization, from any kind of a system. They have no compassion for others. They're not thinking about the suffering of others. They're only, thinking about their own being. So whether they recognize their suffering or not, and they're accepting it as what they are, they have no compassion for it. They have no sense that oh, I'm feeling bad, I'm not doing well, and I'm causing pain to others. I'm causing suffering to others. There's no awareness of that suffering. So there's no compassion. There's no compassion for myself. There's no compassion for others. And we do not experience a single regret when they repeatedly commit non-virtuous actions. So if we're over and over again, we're taking advantage of others, we're hurting others, we're stealing from others, we're robbing from others, we're raping others, we're doing whatever it is that we wish, there's no regret for any of that. So this disconnected family has no sense of morality, has no sense of worth in a community. The community has no value to them, and there are many people who are like that. There are many people today who are like that, and of course everything is all a matter of some kind of percentages, of some kind of degree. So we begin to look at this, in degrees, and we can look at things in history, and we can look at civilization, what we know about it, and say, oh yes, this was much more true than it is now. But we can go to certain places in the world today, and we can see where this kind of behavior, this kind of disconnected family behavior is being believed and practiced right now. So there's no chance to work towards enlightenment with the disconnected family. It's just pure selfishness and pure ignorance. The next family is the indefinite family, or the dubious family. And this family depends on contributory causes, contributory conditions. So this indefinite family they may begin to recognize, oh, well, there is some kind of an organization going on. There is some kind of an intellectualization of something. And they may go and they may partake of that. They may listen to that, but they're very dubious about whether this has any real value to them. They also are dubious about associating with better people who are more experienced or evolved, because it makes them feel bad. You know, oh, if I go with those guys, they always are judging me. I don't feel good, you know, because I'm not as smart as they are, or I can't do the things that they do. So I kind of stay away from them. And that they don't study higher texts, and because again, it makes them feel inferior. However, if they do get involved with these texts, if they do get involved with these people, we do see that they are building up a higher level of awareness, but they're dubious about it. They're not trusting in it. They're looking at it from a great deal of contempt, a great deal of, oh, well, this is manipulation, something like that. So these indefinite family members, these people of dubious nature, are thinking in this way. They have no chance. They have a very slim chance towards enlightenment. Then the next family is called the hearer family. And this hearer family are those who are receiving teachings, you know, and in this case from the Buddha, hearing teachings from the Buddhas. And the reason why they are really paying attention to this is because the Buddha is telling them, well, if you don't behave in this way, then these terrible things are going to happen to you. This is why you are leading such a miserable life, and so on. So the reason, their motivation for listening to the Buddha in the first place is out of some kind of fear that if they don't, some retribution is going to come upon them. So they're not doing it out of goodness. They're doing it out of fear is their motivation. The Buddha taught about that there is this, that we can overcome our suffering, that we can overcome our confusion and so on. And when we do, we develop what he called this nirvana, this level of happiness, this level of goodness. And so in the hearer family, many beings are following the teachings, are listening to the teachings because they want to get to that higher level. So that becomes their motivation. It's a selfish motivation. And also the hearer family, they are doing this, but they're doing it, again, selfishly. They're not doing it for the benefit of others. So the hearers are doing it just for themselves. And they're a little step above the dubious. They're looking at it, but their motivation is a selfish motivation. So then the next level family is called the solitary realizer family, the fourth level. And these are involved with the teachings in the same way that the hearer family is. They fear the suffering. They yearn to attain this nirvana, this great place, this great sense of being. And but they have no compassion. They have the same qualities there, but these beings think that they have evolved, that they have developed something, and they become prideful. They have an arrogance about them, that they are better than other people. So these solitary realizers have this sense of superiority about themselves. And they are selfish to the point that they won't give credit to those who help them to recognize this, because they were receiving teachings from others, but they keep that quiet. They don't share that with others. They say, oh, this is what I thought of. This is what I believe. And you should follow me because of this, because I am so good. I am so wise. And they prefer to stay in their solitary places so that they are not challenged and they can live in their isolation. Their isolation of thinking they are superior and so on. So they maintain this degree of their solitary realizing all by themselves, and they can carry on through their lives in this way. So these are the solitary realizers. The hearer family are called the Shravakas. That's the Sanskrit name for them. And the solitary realizers, the Sanskrit name for them is the solitary is the Pratyeka Buddhas. So you may know people all along the way. You may have recognized yourself along the way, times when you've been dubious about things that you did not believe in, that you were slow to believe in, things where you changed your mind, but your motivation was a selfish motivation. And then things that happened and you began to gain some confidence from it, but it was a selfish, prideful confidence. And you used it to manipulate other people to some degree, and you maintained an isolation for yourself so that you can protect yourself with your superiority, with your thinking of your superiority. So now we come to the fifth family, is the Mahayana family. And this is the family, this is the middle way. This is being on the path now to become a Buddha. This is, and doing this for the benefit of others, that we're overcoming our selfishness, we're overcoming our ego. So here, the qualities here are the naturally abiding family. So this is a natural state for us as human beings, to be aware of the potential to develop all the Buddha's qualities through the mind of the Buddha. So this is the aspiration, that we have this Buddha nature, we have this true nature within ourselves, this awakened quality that we all have, but we may not recognize it. But at the same time, we may have an aspiration to want to be that. So this naturally abiding sensation or this feeling, this motivation, this aspiration that we have within ourselves to develop this mindfulness, that there's some connection that we have, but we're not able to really figure it out for ourselves. We need the help of the community to help us do that. But we're seeking that. We're looking at that. We're working at that. And we are in the working family, that we are the perfectly workable family, the potential to achieve all the Buddha's qualities through the power of habituating themselves in root virtue. So this is the action. We're taking the aspiration that we first had in this Mahayana family, in this being on the middle way path to becoming a egoless person, to become a selfless person, not a selfish person. We have this aspiration. Then we're setting forth an action path in which we can abide in that we can live in that aspiration. We can make that, we can actualize that aspiration and live amongst that. So this is the Mahayana family. So these families are part of the discipline that I first talked about when I said in the three baskets that the discipline of the Vinaya Teachings was to discipline ourselves to be able to keep out all the contaminations, to be able to isolate ourselves to the degree that we can develop a virtue among ourselves, and a respect for ourselves and a respect for our brothers and sisters in that group and so on. And as we do that, we begin to be able to receive the teachings, and we're able to process the teachings and so on. We're doing that for ourselves in the first parts, but then when we get to this fifth part, to this Mahayana family, we begin to do it for the benefit of others. We see that we are part of a community, and there's the benefit only comes if we do it as a community. If I do it selfishly, I'm just alone and I'm not helping anybody. I'm not really helping myself, only to a very small degree. So it's through the sutra teachings that we're learning all this, through the absorbed concentration of doing this, and then the Abhidharma, the teachings of the discriminating awareness that, yes, this is the system of what I am doing. I'm taking this knowledge and I'm applying this knowledge together to be able to do this. Now, I recognize that this is very, very fundamental stuff. This is very, I don't know if you would learn this in college or something like that, in fundamental psychology or something like that, or in teaching programs, how people learn and so on. But that's why we need to do it here too. We need to understand what our very basic fundamentals are, what human nature is made of. We need to look at it at the most fundamental levels, because those foibles that come out of those fundamentals develop into all these different emotions that we have, and we don't recognize what it is that made these very basic things. So we need to be able to look at everything in the very smallest parts and be able to see how they begin to build up, how they begin to compound into the most complex parts of being a fully born human being. So we need to understand this. So I appreciate your patience in listening to this and to contemplating this and thinking about this. And the more that we're able to do this and refer back to this, the greater strength we have at our basic fundamental level. So there's a metaphor for being able to understand who we are and what this all means to us. The metaphor is a water metaphor. If we take a glass, a clear glass, and we put it into a pond or into a river, something that has a lot of silt in it, a lot of mud in it, and we scoop it up and we set that glass down, and we see that glass is just full of all this brown liquid. And that brown liquid, you can't shine light through it. You don't want to drink it. It's not wholesome. It's not tasty. It's not good. It's like our ignorance. It's just all this muddy stuff in there. But if we let that glass sit for a while and we come back to it, we find that the mud starts settling down to the bottom. And maybe at the very top, it starts getting a little bit of clarity to it. And then we come back a few days later and we come back and we see, oh, well, that clarity has gone down even a little bit more. But, there's different gradations of that brown silt that was in there. At first, it was all just muddy. Now, sometimes it's clear at one part. Now in the first third, now maybe it's getting a little tan. The color has changed. It's gotten lighter. And then you let it sit some more, and then you see that the clarity gets even more. And then finally, all that silt just comes right down to the bottom of the glass. And all the ignorance is there at the bottom of the glass. So what appeared to be nothing but ignorance now appears to be clarity, appears to be wisdom, something that we can use, something that we can drink, something that we can cook with, and so on like that. It has practical value to it, and so on. So the analogy of understanding these five families is this water metaphor. So we can even say that this water is like medicine, that this knowledge is like medicine. If we use the analogy, if we use the simile, that in the beginning, we are very sick. We're mentally ill. We don't even recognize how mentally ill we are. But as we begin to go through the process of illuminating what our humanness is made of, how we develop and how we can raise our consciousness and so on, we begin to heal ourselves. So we can say that this water is like a medicine as it gets clearer, and the medicine to be able to recognize our wisdom, our true nature wisdom, that we have this Buddha nature within us. We are Buddha, and that we have to be able to rest. We have to calm down all the noise, all the stuff that we are churning around in our lives, all the arrogance that we are building up in our lives, all the things, all our preconceptions, our misconceptions, all our habitual tendencies need to settle down. And as we settle those down, we begin to see that, oh, my natural state is to be very peaceful, is to be very happy, is to be very virtuous, is to be thinking not of myself all the time, but to be thinking of those who are around me, whether it's my family, or it's my friends, or it's my neighbors, my community, and so on, that we are a society that all needs to come together, and that we all work together, and that I have an integral part in that process. And to be able to approach now our lives with this newfound awareness that we are a contingent part of this life, of this, we call this samsara, this life that we have, all this stuff, all this nature that we have around ourselves is called samsara. And in the beginning, as we view this, it is like an ocean. It is like an ocean of suffering. It's like an ocean of that muddy water, if you could say that. So using the simile now, the glass of water, that this ocean of suffering, and we don't even know that we're suffering. Many people don't even know that they're suffering. So those who recognize that there is something going on, there is some reason for all this, and they're looking for a way, they're seeking a way to be able to get clarity of what this ocean of suffering is all about. And as we do that, we begin to rise up, we begin to get that clarity, and we begin to have glimpses of that nirvana, the nirvana that I spoke about. So the nirvana is the other side of the samsara. The samsara is the ocean of suffering. And the nirvana is the clarity, is the liberation from that suffering. So this is what we're working towards. And it is a process of going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, going around in a circle, round and round in a circle. We repeat these teachings over and over and over again. And they begin to make more and more sense. And we begin to find ways in which we can use these teachings to be able to purify ourselves and to be able to explain what it is to other beings, to be able to help other beings. Because if we selfishly hold on to this, then we're becoming like the Shravakas. We're becoming like the hearer family, or the Pratyeka Buddha family, the solitary realizers. We're holding on to it selfishly. But we find that the true nature is to be part of this, of the large family, of this true nature, of what we are all together, this connectedness. So this connectedness has a word that really explains it. And the word is spirituality. if you look up spirituality, you'll find that there's many different definitions for spirituality, but maybe down among the lower part, it may show that it says connectedness or connectivity or connecting. The spirituality is that concept of that we are all connected, that we are connected with each other, that we are connected with all the nature around us. And that if there is suffering out there, it causes us to be suffering because we are connected to it. If there is happiness out there, happiness can come to us and we can feel happy. Likewise, if we are feeling suffering, we can influence the other beings there who may be happy, but we can take our suffering and we can give that to them, and now they're suffering because we're connected. Likewise, if there's suffering out there and we have happiness, we may be able to have happiness that is going to influence others. So it is a very dynamic relationship, this interconnected spirituality. What we're trying to do is not only to recognize the spirituality, but we're recognizing to make this spirituality a vital point of our lives. So we use this analogy. We use the analogy that we have three bodies. We have our physical body that we're all familiar with. Every morning we look in the mirror and we dress ourselves and we comb our hair and we do all the things that we need to do to be presentable, to look good, and to be respectful of ourselves and to make a good presentation to other people and so on. We go to the gym, we exercise, we eat properly, we do all the things to be able to sustain and make our body a very healthy and happy body. So all of us are aware of that. You know, we may not be thinking about it too much. We take it for granted, but that's what we're doing. We're involved with our physical body. The second body is our intellectual body. With our intellectual body, we're thinking about who we are. We're thinking about what our place is in society, what our place is in the family, what our friends, what our place is in our job, what it is that we want to do, how we do things and so on. What can we think about? What can we do that is going to be useful for ourselves to be able to sustain our living? So we have to have a way to be able to do that. So we intellectualize a process in which we do that. So we go to school, we learn how to read and write, we learn how to, interact with each other, we learn how to talk and think, and we learn how to develop job skills and do all that kind of stuff. And we think about philosophies and stuff like that, to be able to have, more meaningful conversation and understand who we are in the world. So that's our intellectual body. And so most all of our time is consumed with our physical body and our intellectual body. But we also have a spiritual body. And it's the spiritual body that connects us with all other things, that connects us with the other. But we tend to think of ourselves as I, me, mine, and everything else is other. But that is a fault. That is a mistake that we make. We need to recognize that we are all connected, that we all are influencing each other. And that spirituality, that connectedness is through this spiritual body. And this is in our heart center. This is in our heart center. So we talk about our physical body, which is, we in Buddhism, we talk about it that it's symbolic of here at the third eye up here. This is the physical body. The throat is the speech of this wisdom, of this intellectualization, the speech, and the heart The heart mind is the mind of the Buddha, of the awakened one. So the spirituality. So we begin to see that we have these three bodies. With our physical body and our intellectual body, if we try to support ourselves with that, it's not very stable. There's no two-legged chairs that are of any real value to us. We can't do very much with it. It's not stable. But we find that with our spiritual body, now we have a three-legged chair or a stool, and now that can sit all by itself. And we can create a foundation based on those three legs, on those three bodies. And it's said that we become a complete human being when we recognize and develop our physical body to its highest potential, our intellectual body to its highest potential, and to our spiritual body to its highest potential. This is when we become a complete human being. This is when we are a proper vessel to become a Buddha, to become an awakened one. So whether we use the word Buddha, or we use the word Christ, or we use the word God, or we use the word avatar, there's many different words that different cultures and civilizations have used for this complete human being. But we see that we're all the same. And we can share in this experience and be able to learn from each other and be able to develop a community of spiritual, intellectual, physical beings who are doing all this for the benefit of each other, not selfishly for themselves. But we find that our strength is in being able to bring it all together for each other and not selfishly. So, does anybody have any questions or comments about this? I know almost all of you have been here several times, so you've heard this before. Tom, you just turned on your microphone, so did you have something to say?
Yeah, and Lance, you were talking about the different families, the Shrivaka family and the Pratyeka Buddha. Even they are doing it for a selfish reason, but to attain that level of awareness, of enlightenment, there still has to be a lot of work done on those parts, on those two families, correct?
That's correct. Yes, thank you for bringing that up. So what's the analogy there? What analogy would you use for that?
That they're doing it for a selfish reason, but at the same time, they're the amount of work that they put into those to get to that degree of awareness, and that still has to be quite admirable. I mean, because that's not a task that's easily done. I mean, that can take several lifetimes, several lifetimes to get to that point. So, I understand, yes, they are doing it for a selfish reason, and they're doing it to feed their egos and their prides and stuff. But at the same time, I like to think that, that some credit should be given to those that have gone and endured all that, because it takes a tremendous amount of discipline to do what they have done and to acknowledge that.
It's true. And so, the analogy I was looking for, I mean, what you just said is all true. The analogy I was looking for is when you go into an airplane and the first thing they start talking to you about is when the oxygen masks drop out of the bulkhead and they say, put your oxygen mask on first, then help the person next to you. So yes, so you're absolutely right. We have to work for ourselves. We have to be thinking of ourselves in the very beginning, but at critical points, we have to recognize that we may be becoming selfish and that we need to turn our attention for the benefit of others and so on. So yes.
Mhm.
So where do we make that conversation? In the process of learning all this, do we learn that, at chapter 15, or do we learn that in the very first chapter? Are we're looking at the very basic things. And like I said, it's very easy to take these things for granted.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So all sentient beings have Buddha nature, which I'm going to define. One way of defining Buddha nature is that they can become enlightened. So how can a non-human sentient being become enlightened and, achieve nirvana?
Through the family of all beings together, all the interconnected, the spirituality of all beings. So when we learn about the bardas, when we learn about the 6 different human realms, so I don't want to get too far ahead here, but we recognize that there is an animal realm. And the animal realms are sentient beings. And we can make a great deal of difference in animals' lives. We can teach them things. We can show them things. And they will abide by those things. Many of those things, the domesticated animals and so on, can be taught things. However, if we leave for some period of time and we come back, and those animals are very likely to revert back to their natural instincts to do things. But when they are in our presence, we are their masters, so to speak, that we are an influence to them. So in the same way that there is a spiritual levels, awakenings that help other beings. And so as we develop our spiritual awareness and our spiritual our activities, we see that we are helping the other beings and these other realms of being sentient beings.
Okay, so maybe I didn't understand that then. So just by saying you have Buddha nature, that doesn't mean you'll be enlightened in this lifetime? Does that mean you have the capability or not?
No, we all have the capability, and those animals and other beings have the capability too, but do they have the resources to be able to do it? Do they have the intelligence to be able to do it? Do they have the support to be able to do it? Do they have the teachers to be able to do it? If we leave people alone by themselves, will they discover these things on their own? Maybe they will. But if we take the time to be their teacher or introduce them to a teacher, how it will quickly accelerate their being able to learn and to be able to go through the levels to become finally an enlightened person or being. So it's a good question, but it's a question that has a lot of different features to it. Anybody else have a thought about this? Beth, what do you think?
I'm gonna need a minute to think. It's a lot to take in.
Was it making any sense to you?
Yeah, a lot of this is making sense, and it's nice to have the foundation kind of laid out there, because a lot of the, more than anything, the connectedness speaks to me. And of course, I like the systems and organizing into the family. That resonated with me a lot too, just with my background in psychology. It reaches beyond just what I'm learning here and how I understand humanity as a whole and how we learn and take things in. So that's kind of the sense that I'm bringing into this, if that makes sense.
Well, I'd like to ask you, what is your sense of the spiritual aspect to this? Have you studied spirituality beforehand?
No, I haven't. So I have friends who are spiritual. I have a friend who actually dabbled in Buddhism but didn't stick with it. I have another friend in seminary right now. And so we'll have conversations kind of around spirituality and existentialism, but I always kind of felt lost beyond that there is a sort of bigger idea connecting all of this. And that's kind of the main reason why I'm here, because I wanted to explore that connectedness more and bring meaning to that, so I can then bring meaning to my own community.
All right, great. Thank you. Would anybody else like to comment? Okay.
Lance,
Yes. Yes.
how do you personally define enlightenment?
Well, I think we've tried to answer this before, and it is, enlightenment is an experience.
So do you think do you say it's just the non-duality part, no self, emptiness, or is it also beyond that?
Well, you can say that, the enlightened mind is sometimes, referred to as Mahamudra. In our tradition, we call it Mahamudra, the great seal, the great position, the great mind. And the characteristics of Mahamudra is clarity, being able to see things, see as it is, with no contamination, with no emotion, and so on. Being able to see, being able to recognize the emptiness of all things, the emptiness of our compounded nature, that nature itself is empty of its own true essence. That all this is our intellectualization of what we see and how we act and all this. And this is a very simple explanation for that. It goes much deeper than this, but for right now, so the second part of Mahamudra, this enlightened mind, is the realization of this emptiness. And the third part is the unimpededness, that there's no limit, there's no boundaries to what this is. And you can't say anything more about it than that. There's no limits, there's no boundaries. We create those limits and boundaries. But in the meditation, in this Mahamudra, in this enlightened mind, there are no limits, there are no boundaries. So there is clarity, there is emptiness, and there are no limits.
How do I know when I'm seeing things with perfect clarity?
You test it.
How do I do that?
Meditation, contemplation, the process of learning and testing it, practicing it, and so on. It's the analogy here is like a blacksmith. A blacksmith takes a piece of metal and takes a pair of tongs and sticks that piece of metal into a red hot, white hot fire and gets that piece of metal to be white hot as the fire itself. And then he takes it out and then he puts it on an anvil. And then he takes a hammer and he's banging that piece of metal on the anvil, and sparks are flying and stuff is flying off of that piece of metal. And then he takes that piece of metal that he's just hammered and flattened out, made into some shape, and he takes it and he puts it into a vat of water. And then he takes it out again and he puts it back into the fire. And then he does the process over and over and over again. What is that process called? Can somebody tell me what that process is called? It's called tempering, when we're tempering metal. You've all seen pictures of blacksmiths doing this. You've seen pictures of the steel factories when they're doing these things and so on. And they're purifying that piece of metal that's being stuck into the fire. And as they hit it, the slag, the impurities are sparking off. And then he's cooling it down and he puts it back in. And what he's doing from a chemical point of view, he's taking the electrons that piece of metal, the atoms that piece of metal is made of, and he's aligning it. He's getting it to be all in sequence, in a perfect sequence. When that piece of metal came out of the ground, you could take it and you could break it. It was very brittle. But as you do this process, now it becomes pliable. It becomes resistant. It becomes tempered. So this is what we're doing with our knowledge. This is what we're doing with our experience. So to answer Ed's question, we set you can say a hypothesis or something like that, and then you set about to prove it. And you do that through analysis, through logic, and you do it through practice over and over and over again. And you subject it to debate, to conversation like this. And then what you wind up with is a very pliable understanding of the way that nature is. Does that make sense, Ed?
I'm struggling with it. I mean, to a point, yes, but I'm not there yet.
Well, so you're looking at it from your personal point of view then?
I'm sure I am.
Okay, of course you are. I mean, that's what we do, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
But then can you appreciate others who have gone through this process and see that there is a result that is what we're talking about?
Yes, I just somehow I have trouble getting my mind around the idea that at some point I would say I recognize that I've reached perfect clarity, or I recognize that I've reached Buddhahood. How do I know that I've arrived? I mean, I'm not trying to push you to answer all that now. That's what I'm struggling with. Of course, I know that I haven't, but how would I ever know that I had?
The word gnosis.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Greek word, right? To know.
Mm-hmm.
And we can know something vicariously.
Uh-huh.
We can read it in a book. You can hear it from a teacher. You can imagine this is what it might be. So there's vicarious experience. There's vicarious knowing. But then there is gnosis. And when there's gnosis, then you become that which is the knowledge. You become the wisdom. You become, In this case, the question is, you become the enlightenment. You become the light. You become the Buddha. You become the Christ. Whichever, whatever name you want to call it, you become that. And in the beginning, it's not stable. So you're testing it and so on. But after a period of time, it becomes more and more stable. And in our everyday human life, we're not likely to reach that perfection. But the perfection is being on the path to be beating the piece of iron and putting it in the water and putting it back in the fire. That's the level of perfection that we can get to as human beings. If we're trying to hold on, to it too much and trying to identify it too much, that's our ego at work.
Right. Yeah. So the idea is to make the glimpses as long and as broad as possible.
Correct.
Yeah.
And they become your vision.
Right.
But
It becomes your state of mind. Yes, Grant.
to achieve enlightenment, does it have to be all your waking hours? Or let's say you experience these no self, emptiness experiences during meditation, and you're able to do it for hours on meditation, but during the rest of your time you go in and out of these things. Are you enlightened at that point or not enlightened?
Well, no, it's a temporary enlightenment. It has value, but it's not a perfect enlightenment. So, we talk about yogis and we talk about practitioners and we talk about bodhisattvas and so on, and they are all on the path to perfect, complete enlightenment. Perfect, complete enlightenment is the level of Buddha. That's how we define Buddha. Perfect, complete enlightenment or awakening. So that
there's no backsliding from that point.
No.
Okay,
No.
But I'm still a fallible human being. Fallible human beings backslide all the time.
Yes. And as long as you remain that, then you're certainly not a Buddha, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't have a glimpse of enlightenment.
Okay.
Yes,
Well,
Michael.
One of my teachers in my meditation program, Jack Cornfield, one of his early books, he wrote in the year 2000, is specifically speaks about this sort of phenomena, and it's summed up pretty nicely in the title. I know you probably can't see it, but the title of the book is "After the Ecstasy, the Laundry." So he tells a lot of stories that there's lamas and religious people and Christians and regular folks and teachers that he's come to know and interview around what that moment of enlightenment looks like, what that total transformation that occurs, what it looks like and what it feels like, and how it affects their life. And it's at least according to him, there's almost always going to be some laundry to do. And if you're doing laundry well, then it's a meditation. But there's, for being a sentient human, I suspect that there's always going to be some mundane sort of pedestrian human life things that we're going to do, because that's the kind of stuff that happens in our family relationships and our work on this plane. I thought I would just mention that it's a great book, and he tells stories about people's experience touching enlightenment and how that changes them, and then what happens afterwards.
Yes, thank you.
That's a really good comment, because I think it also lends to the discussion between like a monastic and a lay person. And I don't know. I mean, Tibetan Buddhism really doesn't have much of a lay person type of Buddhahood tradition. It's more of a monastic tradition, isn't it?
How about Milarepa? How about Marpa?
Well, I'm saying someone maybe in the 20th century. How about?
Well, sure. I can't quote the books, but there's lots of them. I mean, so sure. And
But when
that's-
you're a lay, harder though to have this perfect enlightenment, complete, I guess is the word you used. Then a monastic, you could definitely conceivably, it'd be much easier.
well, because of the appearances.
Well, because
Because-
of also the worldly things that you'd have to spend,
Well, you
8
don't
hours
think-
of the day.
You don't, I'm not trying to disparage being a monastic, but I'm trying to say is they're subject to the same things that we are. Now, they have a higher degree of discipline maybe in their lives, but they have emotions just like we have emotions and so on. And in the Kagyu tradition and in the Nyingma tradition, the layperson is as valuable and as much a potential of a Buddha as the monastics are.
Hey, Lance, I think somewhere down the line, you're probably gonna go get into, in the jewel ornament, don't we get into some Bhumi levels and
Oh yeah,
and what the Bodhisattva path looks like? And
yeah.
I mean, I just remember the fact that we're on the Bodhisattva path, and once we reach a Bodhisattva level, then a lot of our work remains with the rest of sentient beings, and so that requires us to work in and around samsara until there's nobody left there. I mean, that's the idea, I think.
Yes. And we'll see. I mean, like the chapter that we're going to do next is called the working basis, the precious human life. And then the chapter after that is called the contributory cause, the spiritual master. And then the chapter after that is the attachment, the antidote to the attachment to this life. So we're going to be looking at all the things that are pulling us back to remain human beings. And by looking at that, we're going to be able to see how it is that we can liberate, how we can let go from those things. And it takes many, many circles, many, many turns of the circles. It takes many, many lifetimes. This is the idea of a reincarnation. That we have these migrating lives that we're going round and round, and not as Lance or as Tom or as Gary or any one of us, not in that same way, but just this experience is going around, and it's consciousness recognizing itself and seeing what that is and being able to liberate from all of that. we exist in a particular dimension. And, so the premise is, what other dimensions are there? And is that what we are getting glimpses of? That which we call enlightenment, is that not just another dimension? Is that the fourth dimension or the fifth dimension or the 16th dimension? So it's contemplating all this, opening ourselves to up all of this. And what we find is there's very little that we can know as human beings. The wisdom comes from the experience. And that experience does not need to be articulated. We're at a point now where we want to articulate it. But the reality of it is, it doesn't need to be articulated because it is. And that's what we're trying to realize, to recognize. And it's hard because we don't want to give this up. We don't want to give up our intelligence. We don't want to give up our ordinary mind, our ordinary wisdom. It's what makes us special, right?
It's just when you live in a dualistic world and you work in this environment where conceptual overlays are just, the essence of everything you do, to me, it seems like this complete enlightenment becomes definitely problematic.
Well, that's because you're locked in the dualism.
Right, but I think this layman's life, I'm just saying, it seems much more difficult.
Of course it's difficult, but that's the work.
Let it go. Just let it go. It's not that hard. Let go of that attachment. All that aversion. Just let it go. And it will come.
So the key to it is the meditation, the practice meditation. That's the one-pointed mindfulness that cuts through that duality. The duality is the monkey mind. It's jumping from one thought to another, going from one thing to another. Here's my identity. Here's what I want. This is what I want to do. All these things. And when we can cut through that and be able to one-pointed mindfully concentrate on one thing, then we begin to cut, then we're cutting through that dualistic nature. So all the hatred, all the aversion, all the delusion, all the greed, all the jealousy and everything is cut through. But that's what the work is. It gets easier and easier. It's our natural state of mind. We're naturally loving, virtuous beings, compassionate beings. But through selfishness, do we develop all the aggression and all the negativities and so on. So we have to cut through all that, and it's a process to do all that. Okay, does anybody else have another point? And because we'll get to our dedications. So all of our teachings, all of our practices, all of our studies are basically done in 3 sections. The first section are the opening prayers, where we state our motivations, the aspirations as to why we are doing this. And so the major aspiration is that we're doing this for the benefit of the enlightenment of other beings, so that we're developing selflessness, not selfishness. Then the main body of our practice, of our teaching, is what we've been discussing, what we've been talking about here, what the lecture was, or what our study is, and so on, or what our meditation is, if we're doing a meditation practice. That's the main body. And then at the end, then we do a dedication, because there has been a shift, there has been a change, at least there's been a potential of that. We're not the same as we were 2 hours ago. We've heard some new things. We've thought some new thoughts. Some things have changed in our lives, and we're no longer the same as we were before. So in a way, it's like a death and a rebirth. So now that rebirth, now we are dedicating whatever wisdom we have gained, whatever skillful means that we have gained, whatever method or merit that we have gained through this process, now we are dedicating that to the enlightenment of other beings. Otherwise, we're holding it on to ourselves and saying, oh, I'm so great. After this 2-hour thing, I accomplished so much. I thought some new thoughts. I am really good. And we go around thinking how much better we are, and so on, creating our own self-importance and superiority. But if we dedicate that to the enlightenment of others, it has a very humbling effect. So it's a very important part of the process. So now we're going to do our dedication prayers. So on page, excuse me. So page 20 and 21 and 22, and I know there's going to be some words here that not everybody's going to understand, but we will go through these in another time when you can understand these better and so on. So we start with this prayer. By the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Trikumpa Ratna Shri, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Then, glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yogins, Yoginis, and Dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, or rebirth as a Sravaka or Pratyeka Buddha, may all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Mars and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, and arrogance and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachments to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such, and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of the enlightenment of all sentient beings. Thank you all.
Thank you,
very-
Lance.
You're welcome. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good
Thank
night.
you, Lance.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us.